everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Keith Giffen Day. We're taking a look at Legion of Superheroes issue 293, cover dated November 1982, the next installment of the Great Darkness saga. Pretty cool looking cover here. I'm going to credit this one fully to Giffen because his is the only signature I see here. And just I will say, as opposed to the interiors inked by Larry Momstead that I've mentioned in past reviews, does look pretty much like a DC kind of house style aesthetic. I prefer what I'm seeing on the cover here from some straight Giffen. A little more shadow work. Things look maybe a little bit more cartoony, slightly more Kirby-ish, of course. I always like that. Even though this is not his straight kind of Kirby rip-off style that he did in the earlier installments of reviews that I've looked at, his Defender stuff in the 70s. And clever integration of the title here actually within the artwork, something that Keith Giffen does a lot of, I think, and this is something that comes back on some of his cover designs later. But, you know, really epic in as far as the conflict between the Legion of Superheroes and the Servants of Darkness here in the background, although, you know, kind of they have specific shapes and contours and looks within the comic, but here on the cover they're all pretty kind of generic, so they're used kind of in a more symbolic fashion, I guess. Pretty cool. And we got some Kirby crackle in the back and a bit in the foreground here, which of course makes it for me. Something I didn't notice, but that I will mention, that I didn't notice originally while going through the issue, the extra free 16-page comic preview, Masters of the Universe. If you're into the Legion of Superheroes story, it kind of cuts into the narrative right there in the middle, but I really enjoyed it, and I'll probably spend more time talking about that than the actual Legion chapter, because as I mentioned before, every page and part of the plot that kind of is derived from the Servants of Darkness and who their master is, and that we know will be, of course, revealed to be Darkseid. The other kind of ancillary B and C, how do you say that word? The B and C and D plots, the other Legionnaire characters really take away from that, in my opinion. You know, I know this is kind of a classic storyline for a lot of people, but other than the Darkseid parts and the Servants of Darkness and all that, the Legionnaire stuff I could kind of just do without, to be honest. Don't think I would ever read this comic other than for the fact that this is, you know, Keith Giffen, and that, you know, people have over the years kind of recommended the storyline. So we'll see where it goes. At least hopefully with the Darkseid stuff, it'll stay interesting, even though it's not exactly perfect either. I'll talk about it later when we see who will become Darkseid, the master of the Servants of Darkness. Paul Levitz is the writer, Keith Giffen penciler, and I guess giving plotter credit here, Larry Malstead inker, Carl Gafford colorist, and John Costanza letterer. So we start off with a pretty cool kind of Star Wars-y, you know, cosmic shot of ships and members of the Legion of Superheroes here, Superboy, as I mentioned in past reviews, and they're on their way to confront the Servants of Darkness. Basically, they've mustered up all the forces of the Legionnaires, and they're going to take on whoever the master is. So these are the pages, like I said, that give us kind of like B, C, and D stories, and the Legionnaires being such a Legion of Superheroes, excuse me, being such a huge superhero team and having so many members. You know, every page almost in this issue focuses on different members, or at least in this kind of beginning of the story and beginning of the issue. I'm confused between Ultra Boy and Mon-El, and a lot of them are very similar looking as well, so it's kind of hard to tell some of them apart. The alien characters obviously being the ones that are a little easier to pick out, but this is the stuff that, again, I'm not really interested in. This whole sequence when they go on to this planet, and it's clearly some sort of, you know, heavily polluted atmosphere. Really like the inking effect there. I think that works really well, and you know, thankfully the Servants of Darkness come into play pretty soon. Unfortunately, they give us another C story here with Superboy, half a page or 2/3 of a page, and then the other characters. So I'll kind of skip over that stuff a little bit. This is Chameleon Boy, who's been imprisoned, you know, since the beginning of the storyline and before that. So obviously I don't know exactly what that's about. So that's more stuff I want to skip over. And, you know, as I'm going through these pages, art-wise, there's not a lot of interesting stuff. As I've mentioned before, the kind of, you know, house-style DC look that we've got here over top of Keith Giffen, I don't know if it works for me so much. There's kind of supposed to be a poignant, emotional moment with his father. That's his father, Chameleon Boy's father, that, you know, doesn't really translate because I have no connection to these characters. But then we get into some cool, once again, you know, Darkseid showing up stuff before he actually, you know, shows up fully formed as Darkseid, as he's been going through the past few issues as a silhouette, and even in the first installment of the storyline, he had quite a different look in his costume and stuff. So I don't know what's going on there. It's not really a lot of consistency. He just seems to change form a bunch of times, and eventually until him materialize into Darkseid, I guess. But yeah, some cool 80s kind of printing effects here. I like some of the textures that are thrown in. This bit of screen tone on the planets all across the color hold here on this planet, I think looks cool. Gives it that 80s look, right? That vintage kind of stuff that I like aesthetically. The buildings here are almost more as like clean line diagrams, and then the screen tone used again for the appearance of Darkseid. Once again, you've got the Kirby crackle, and I mean, this very much does resemble a boom tube, right? Just with some color holds and done in kind of different textures, but still Kirby inspired texture. So, you know, kind of harkens back to that. A lot of screen tone all throughout this issue that I think works really well, and in these more kind of cosmic sequences and sequences involving Darkseid. Back to half a page for these characters, half a page for these characters, you know, just telling us how they're worried, going up against the Servants of Darkness. I will say the layouts are interesting all the way throughout, even though this is like a 80s comic. I still think Keith Giffen is doing some interesting stuff visually with the layouts and making it a little bit more interesting and varied. So these are 2 pages where not a lot is going on, but the layout definitely helps move things along a little bit. These books fairly dialogue heavy as well, and not, you know, the most fun and interesting dialogue, very exposition-y, if I can say it that way. I love these little diagrams that he's been doing though all the way throughout, with the color holds usually in blue. All throughout the series he's been doing these. And again, anytime we get some cosmic sequences, I think there's just a great integration of all the means that they had in 1982 to use different graphic textures and techniques to convey the cosmicness of the whole situation. Again, love the Kirby crackle around the purple silhouette here. This whole deal where the silhouette is in screen tone. I don't know how well that shows up on the camera. Kind of like Kirby's collages in the 70s. I don't know how well it works here. It's a little muddled, but it's still kind of cool reading it in person. This definitely harkens back to Darkseid's Omega beams that he throws from his eyes, right? So, you know, unless you have no idea who Darkseid is and have never heard of him, at this point reading this whole storyline, you're pretty sure that's who's showing up. And as I mentioned before, when the Servants of Darkness show up, I definitely feel like one of these guys here with this battering ram kind of stick is at least bears a huge resemblance to Kalibak, who's Darkseid's son, and another one of these Servants of Darkness that we'll see a bit later, who's got what looks like an astro harness, has to be Orion. So I hope, like, the mystery is revealed at the end of this issue officially, that Darkseid is the master of the Servants of Darkness, but hopefully next issue, the last issue, the conclusion to the storyline, I'm hoping we find out the identities of the Servants of Darkness themselves. I'm very curious about that. So again, other than the Darkseid stuff, this was the most interesting thing in this comic, and I was really, again, I didn't read the blurb on the cover originally, so 16 whole pages really cuts into the Legion Superheroes storyline, but because it's He-Man, I will definitely forgive them, because it was really fun to see this. I remember, you know, I was a huge He-Man fan as a kid, really discovered it through the toys and the cartoon, but later on found out, of course, that there was kind of a comic book legacy, not just in the ones that were included with the toys, but also DC Comics being the first publisher to actually publish He-Man comics. So I guess this is where they were starting to publish it, 1982, so no cartoon yet, but definitely the original toy line is out, because as we go through this 16-page comic preview, it's pretty obvious that the designs they're using for the artists, the reference that they're using are direct reference from the toys. At least I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And a lot of the characters showing up seem to coincide with the first wave of He-Man toys and which characters were actually in it. So I will say this, there's some more fantastical elements, of course, because of, you know, the sci-fi elements, I guess, that are included in the He-Man mythos. But as far as the other side, which is a little more kind of barbarian-y and sword and sorcery, they definitely lean more into that. I think visually the artist does. Kurt Swan and Dave Hunt. Okay, interesting. So Kurt Swan's definitely going, I think, for more of a Prince Valiant kind of vibe. Like, that's his reference for it. So, you know, the Castle of Eternia, if you remember in the cartoon, was much more kind of, you know, sci-fi inspired, and this is definitely like Arthurian. Is that how you say that? Arthurian legend kind of castles, right? In English lore. And again, Prince Valiant. I really feel a huge Prince Valiant vibe here. And if you know anything about the original characters from the He-Man line of toys, this is Zodak. To me, kind of a ripoff of Metron from the New Gods, right? He-Man definitely owes a lot to the New Gods and Jack Kirby, for sure. Once you see, Thunder the Barbarian and Blackstar, I think is the other guy with the sword, that kind of predate He-Man in Saturday morning cartoons. You kind of can see the lineage and where it goes and how He-Man comes to be, right? This is fun because you see Prince Adam before they gave him the cartoon garb of like the pink kind of vest and the white shirt. So walking around bare-legged here. He was always supposed to be kind of foppish. So not the most exciting artwork for He-Man, to be honest. It's kind of, as I said, very Prince Valiant-y. Kind of feels of another time, even in 1982 to me. Not that Kurt Swan's a horrible artist in any way, but just kind of, traditional kind of storytelling, I guess, is how I would describe it at this point. Not too many crazy, interesting angles, not too much horizon tilting or anything like that. And again, the mythos haven't quite formed yet, so I'm not quite sure if Prince Adam I don't think he uses the sword turn into He-Man. He just gets changed into him, it seems. Not quite sure how that works. Someone got confused storyline wise because this is supposed to be what was her name? The sorceress, right? But clearly, if you know the toy line, this is Teela's kind of original look. So someone got confused there. You've got the 3 toes on Skeletor, so definitely based on the toy line, right? But you do get a slight shift of gauntlet. Did Skeletor, the toy, have this kind of gauntlet on his hands? Anyways, again, the designs are consistent for some aspects and very inconsistent for others. So, but I definitely feel like it all comes from that first, again, wave of He-Man toys. Merman is in there, Beastman. And then it gets weird because all of a sudden Superman shows up. So I guess because they got the license, I know there is a He-Man and Superman crossover issue somewhere. I don't know if that's even how He-Man was introduced maybe into the DC universe. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, Superman and He-Man appearing together. This creature here, I mean, come on, this is like. Again, no offense to Kurt Swan, but it really feels like all his references are from like the 1950s and stuff. So maybe some Japanese monster movies of the day, or American kind of sci-fi movies. Just not a very inspired design in my mind. It looks more like a Muppet to me than anything else, and not quite scary. Get some cool shots of Battle Cat, who looks, again, exactly like the toy. And miscommunication between Zodak and He-Man, so we got a bit of a confrontation. But I'm not going to waste too much time on the storyline here because no one really cares, to be honest, neither do I. But it's fun to see kind of these early interpretations of He-Man and his mythology, and to see obviously that some things are going to change along the way, and especially when the He-Man cartoon comes in. A lot of the backstory of He-Man changes quite drastically. Yeah, fun little kind of view into 1982 and the He-Man timeline and the very beginning of it. As I said, my earliest conscious memories of He-Man is the cartoon, which I think started coming out in maybe 83, maybe 84. So a little bit past this. And, I can remember when I'm 4 and 5 in 1985, it was kind of the year I kind of, can remember stuff from my youth, right? Before that, it's all very kind of murky, but in around that time, I've got stronger memories of this kind of stuff. So, fun and nostalgic to see where it kind of all started, at least in comic book form here. And then we're back to the Legion of Superheroes and the conflict between them and the Servants of Darkness. Some more cool graphic effects here with the shadows, the Kirby crackle, the color holds, like all throughout. I gotta say, color wise, it's of that era, but I do kind of like it. I think it harkens back, and I may have said this earlier in the storyline reviews, to the 70s a little bit, and gives it a slightly more kind of psychedelic vibe, which I really like. Again, still connected to the 70s here in 1982, more so than the neon stuff of the 1980s or mid to late 80s. So Darkseid's starting to form. So he's on Daxam, and he's kind of taken over that race of people, and he's going to use them to attack the Legion of Superheroes. Now, all I know really about Daxam is they're kind of like Kryptonians, I believe. Is it Daxon? Is that what it's called? Anyways, I'm not interested enough to remember all of that. So a lot of cosmic destruction kind of and fighting and conflict going on in these pages here. Lots of power emanations, you know, really going full tilt on the cosmic stuff, the Kirby stuff, the crackle. And slowly but surely, as they fight the Servants of Darkness, we're moving our way towards the pivotal moment that we've all been waiting for, finally. Find out who the Master is. And in a quick shot from the back, you can already kind of guess from the shape that that is DARKSEID. The silhouette really sells it here, right? The profile. And boom, he's revealed here in a splash page in all his dark glory. DARKSEID. Now, about the interpretation of DARKSEID in this comic, as opposed to the original by Kirby, the fact that he's just laughing out loud maniacally is what kind of throws me off this version of DARKSEID, because to me, DARKSEID was always about, you know, this whole anti-life equation he's looking for is basically the suppression of emotion, right? So DARKSEID has never seemed like an emotional kind of guy who would gloat and glee and you know, hoo ha ha, and do all that kind of typical supervillain stuff. The way Jack Kirby presented him, already he's literally stone-faced, right? So very rarely would he show actual emotion. It would happen in small little moments, but nothing like this with the maniacal laugh. Oftentimes his arms were off behind his back, you know, and he, you know, basically he's so confident and sure of his own power and everyone around him's fear of that power that he doesn't ever feel the need to seem on the defensive or seem ready to attack or anything like that. He doesn't need to. Most times his minions do that for him. And he himself is a pretty just kind of, again, stone-faced, non-emotional, whether sad, angry, happy, gleeful, any of these things. So that's something I think a lot of people miss when they do DARKSEID or they reinterpret DARKSEID. I read the storyline by Grant Morrison, way back. Oh, this is probably the 2010s. I'm not 100% sure, but he had this whole storyline where DARKSEID comes back and manifests through, I forget his name, but the cop from the New God storyline that Kirby created, and manifest through his body. And I thought the interpretation of DARKSEID there was very much more in tune and in line with what I feel like Kirby expected and saw in the character himself and how he interpreted his own character. And this last shot I really like because that profile there is, you know, to me very much, pretty much almost fully Kirbyized, Kirbicized, however you want to term that. You've got the Servant of Darkness here on the Astro harness, so is there going to be some sort of connection there to him maybe resolving the conflict next issue? Is that why he's in there? I don't know, very kind of symbolic image presenting the players for next issue, the conclusion to the saga of the Great Darkness. But yeah, I love that interpretation here, very Kirby-esque, looks cool. That open space that usually would be shadow thrown in the white there looks really cool. And looking forward to the conclusion, next issue. So there you go, guys. That is my review of the Legion of Superheroes, issue number 293. If you are still watching and you are still subscribed, thank you so much. I really do appreciate all your support. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a quick second for you. It really helps the channel out, helps us grow, and helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. So everyone, again, thank you for watching and have an awesome day.
Like! Subscribe! Like! Subscribe!
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KINGCOMICS.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.